Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that's often simplified. A tale of vast continents, clashing empires, and the profound, lasting impact of their meeting. This isn't a story of mythical creatures, but one of real-world powers and peoples. Let's explore the complex history of European contact and colonization in Africa. Our story begins long before lines were drawn on a map, in the 15th century, when the first European ships, mainly from Portugal, arrived on the coasts of Africa. They weren't conquerors in the way we might imagine. They were traders. Think of it like a new player entering an already bustling marketplace. Explorers, backed by figures like Prince Henry the Navigator, were searching for new trade routes and valuable goods. They found a continent rich with gold, ivory, and vibrant societies. During these early centuries, from the 1400s to the 1700s, European presence was largely confined to coastal trading posts. Nations like Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands joined the Portuguese, setting up small forts and stations. But let's be clear, they were guests, often paying tribute to local African rulers. The real power, the control over the vast interior and its intricate trade networks, remained firmly in African hands. Europeans relied entirely on African middlemen to acquire the goods they desired. This was a relationship, albeit an unequal one built on trade. However, this period also planted the seeds of a horrific chapter in human history. The demand for labor in the newly established American colonies grew, and the trade in goods tragically shifted to a trade in human lives, beginning the devastating Atlantic slave trade that would forcibly displace millions. For hundreds of years, this dynamic of coastal trading posts persisted. The African interior remained, for the most part, a mystery to Europeans, protected by powerful kingdoms, challenging terrain, and diseases like malaria, to which Europeans had no immunity. But in the 19th century, the rules of the game began to change dramatically. A wave of technological advancements in Europe served as the key to unlocking the continent's interior. Steamships could now navigate Africa's mighty rivers against the current. The invention of the Maxim gun gave small European forces a devastating military advantage. And crucially, the discovery of quinine as a treatment for malaria meant Europeans could survive longer inland. The stage was set for a new, far more aggressive era. So, what fueled this sudden, intense interest? It was a perfect storm of motivations. First, economic interests. The Industrial Revolution in Europe created a bottomless appetite for raw materials. Africa was a treasure trove of rubber, palm oil, diamonds, gold, and copper, all essential for European factories and economies. Second, political ambition. In the hyper-competitive atmosphere of 19th century Europe, owning colonies became the ultimate status symbol. A vast overseas empire was a declaration of national power and prestige. It was a race, and no nation wanted to be left behind. Finally, there was a powerful ideological justification. Many Europeans, steeped in flawed theories of racial and cultural superiority, genuinely believed they had a civilizing mission. They saw it as their duty to bring Christianity, Western education, and their way of life to Africa, often viewing African cultures as primitive and in need of saving. This paternalistic and racist worldview provided a moral cover for what was, at its core, a project of domination. This frantic rush to claim territory culminated in one of history's most infamous meetings, the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. Imagine a group of powerful executives gathered around a boardroom table, carving up a company they don't own. That's essentially what happened. Representatives from 14 European nations and the United States met in Berlin to formalize their claims on Africa. They drew lines on a map, creating borders that sliced through established kingdoms, ethnic groups, and ancient trading routes. Who was missing from this meeting? The people whose fate was being decided. Not a single African leader was invited or consulted. The Berlin Conference didn't start the colonization, but it legitimized it and set the rules for the land grab, igniting what became known as the Scramble for Africa. Within a few short decades, nearly the entire continent, from Cairo to Cape Town, was under European control. This was the true beginning of the colonial era. With the borders drawn, the next phase was to make that control a reality on the ground. This wasn't a peaceful process. It was an era of conquest and subjugation. While many African kingdoms and communities fiercely resisted, the technological gap was often too great. European armies, armed with machine guns and modern artillery, systematically defeated local forces. Once military control was established, the colonial powers began to fundamentally reshape African societies to serve their own interests. The economic exploitation was ruthless. The primary goal of a colony was to be profitable for the colonizer. This meant extracting resources as cheaply as possible. Africans were often forced into labor through heavy taxation, land seizure, or outright violence. They worked in mines, on plantations growing cash crops like cotton and cocoa for European markets, and built the very railways and roads used to transport those resources to the coast. The wealth flowed in one direction, out of Africa and into Europe. Local economies, once diverse and self-sufficient, were reoriented to serve a global system from which they barely benefited. But the impact went far beyond economics. It was also a cultural assault. Colonial administrators imposed their own languages, legal systems, and forms of government. European languages, like English, French, and Portuguese, became the languages of power, education, and administration. Generations of children were taught in schools that glorified European history and denigrated their own traditions. Speaking a native language was often punished, leading to a profound sense of cultural dislocation. This created a new class of educated elites who were often alienated from their own heritage. Caught between two worlds, the goal, whether stated or not, was a form of cultural erasure to replace African ways of being with the European model. The scars of this colonial project, the arbitrary borders, the economic dependency, the linguistic and cultural divides continue to shape the continent today. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a pivotal and often painful part of world history. Understanding this past is crucial to understanding our present. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration. We'll see you in the next video.